Hey, we just wrapped up an absolutely incredible next part of our Leadership Live series with Tony Litwiller, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Thrombolex. There are some incredible nuggets with leadership. You're not going to want to miss this. Hope you enjoy. Hello, FloodGate family. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Leadership Live. And we are absolutely excited to speak with Tony Litwiller, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Thrombolex. Incredible individual. I've had the opportunity of sitting down with him at conferences, having a beer, getting to know him. I know he's got a ton of insights, but Tony, I'm not going to steal your thunder. For those that haven't had that opportunity, tell us a little bit about yourself and, of course, Thrombolex.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Very pleased. Thank you for inviting me to this session. So, like a lot of others, grew up through the sales organizations back in the day with Abbott and Tyco before it was Covidian, Kyphon, and then I jumped to a startup called Echoes, and I was one of 13 reps there and built my career to the acquisition by BTG. We then built the interventional PE market, pulmonary embolism market, which it is now multi-billion-dollar market. We were then acquired by Boston Scientific. I went off and sold ventilators during COVID with a company called MedTech. And now I'm back in the PE space with Thrombolex. And Thrombolex is an innovative device that's mechanical, has a mechanical basket that opens and closes, and it also delivers thrombolytics. And so we now have our PE indication and are heavily marketing and selling for DVT, arterial, and PE usage.
Awesome. I mean, I know the prevalence of that DVT. I think more people die of that than breast cancer and car accidents, or every year, combined. So it's just one of those really silent killers. So awesome solution you guys are really developing in the market and just launched and got approval in April. So
thank you.
Yeah. Guys, if you haven't been on a Leadership Live before, we're going to take questions at the end. I'm going to ping Tony with a few questions here. But at the end, if you have questions, you want to pick his leadership brain about the product, about him, et cetera, just comment below. We're going to take those comments here at the end. So make sure you comment either below to the side, whatever your screen looks like. But Tony, question for you about leadership. This is a unique space in medical device. What do you find are some of the key attributes that make it a good leader?
I think about that in two different levels. Number one is a frontline leader. And this is whether, from marketing or sales or engineering or anything, but, really understanding your people, listening to your people, what motivates them, a transparent, honest communicator. Being a leader is not always easy. It's not a popularity contest, and you have to have some tough conversations with your people. And then I think it's also mastering the human resource element of hiring, performance management, documentation, and those type of things. Mm-hmm. When you look at an executive level or vice president level, it's really, what's the strategy of the corporation? What are the goals of that? What markets are you currently in? What's the direction of that market? Right now, I think there's lots of companies that are excited about getting into EMEA. And, what's the ROI? What are the resources that are going to be needed to go and get that return on investment? And finally, I think this is a piece that gets lost is, as an executive, it's no longer about just your department. It's about working with other departments within the facility. And I'll give you some examples. Commercial, if you want to get to Europe, you need to talk to regulatory, right? It'd be working with regulatory about the pathway to get there. R&D has to work with manufacturing. R&D has to work with commercial for next stage innovation. And so I think those are the type of bigger thinking things you have to have an executive. You can't just fall back in just a people management.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think differentiating the two. I think, fundamentally that frontline leader, that's some leadership basics, right? Understanding people, knowing the process to be able to develop, or identify the shortfalls of the people. So those are fundamentals. But then it sounds like when you're getting to the executive level, that's where some of that med device understanding, not thinking about market size, but what's the barrier, right? Do you have now EU MDR that you have to get through to get to EMEA, right? And understanding some of those things to it really differentiates. That's good. I haven't thought about that levels of understanding, but totally makes sense because you're being it's more strategy than just basic people leadership, right? So
absolutely.
You've been with the really big companies. You've led in those companies, and you've done startups, and you've built up startups. But I'm sure you haven't done it all 100% right. So there are a couple lessons maybe in leadership that you learned the hard way that you want to share to the group here.
I think with a small company, you're always managing resources, right? And, do you go out and try to, from a person, like just hire, 20, 30 sales reps and hope the market comes to you? Or do you build as you go? And I've been always the type to build as I go. But I think it's really critical when you get that market signal, when you know you have something, you need to resource that. You need to take a stand as a leader and ask for those resources. And these opportunities, there is a time limit. There's competition. There's change in reimbursement. There's all different factors that can be part of this. But when you have that signal, you've got to go for it and you've got to demand those resources. I think the second one is really more from when you are trying to get reimbursement through CMS or an indication with the FDA, you'll have expertise within your building, but you need to go and find the experts, the best of the best, those DC attorneys, those folks that do this every single day. And it's going to be expensive, but it's the right use of your resources to make sure you go through that pathway correctly and get to the endpoint that you want. Yeah. And I would say those are probably my two biggest, more resource pieces that I've learned, whether it's expansion of a market or trying to get into a market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And imagine thinking of that kind of a race car driver scenario, right? Initially, you're going through the curves, and you got to keep a measured approach so you don't wreck the vehicle. But being able to sense when you're on that straightaway,
yep,
to layer on that gas and not being scared to do it at that moment, and so you can create separation from you and the rest of the pack. I think is a really good lesson. I think, especially when you get used to driving at a certain speed, it's scary, right? To put the foot on the gas, yep, right?
That's right.
And I love the second thought is there's some really critical things that you've got to get right. And those regulatory, FDA, and reimbursement. Because if you don't get approved or you can't get paid, kind of nothing else matters. Yeah. So
you're right.
Do it right. Because I've seen companies that don't, and they get the wrong code, it dies. Yeah. Yep. So I think a couple of great lessons of advice. Sounds like you might have learned a couple of those maybe the hard way at a point in time. Yeah. So that's good. So here's one: developing high performers. Once you get putting feet on the gas, but you're going to get those great people. How do you develop them? How do you treat those high performers within your organizations to be successful?
Yeah, I think you really need to understand what their goals are, what their motivations are. Mm-hmm. Just because you're a high performing rep or want to be a high performing rep doesn't mean they want to be a manager someday. Their lifestyle may not fit to be a manager.
Yeah.
So really, like, what are your goals? What are your motivations? Once you understand that, it's really I would say kind of bringing them on the journey. Bringing them into your space at times, right? Exposing them to a little bit more of the company's strategy and the company's culture and the good and the bad a little bit, Ask them also to lead from within. And I'll give you an example. When I led the Echoes team, we had 65, almost 70 reps, and then another 20, 25 clinicals. And I developed some of the strongest internal leaders within my sales team. Folks that have been around the block for a long time, didn't necessarily want to be managers, love to be sales reps. And I really leaned on them to bring up the team and also kind of sheriff the team as well at times. And so you can bring those high performers and give them a lot of the responsibilities that they wouldn't necessarily have to kind of test them, but also give them a taste of what they may be walking into. Yeah. I think the other piece that goes along with this is think about other additional resources you may be able to give that person. Maybe it's an extra clinical, maybe it's a junior sales rep or something along those lines that can help them grow their business. But don't forget to give them attention. It's easy to focus on your poorer performers and trying to bring up your D player to a C player and so on and so forth. Sometimes pushing that A to be an A plus is a little bit easier, and you get a bigger bang for your buck.
Yeah. No, that is a lot of times we were focused on the squeaky wheel, but that one that's rolling really fast. If you accelerate that 10%, it's a big difference, right? And I love resourcing them correctly, and not and really make it saying there's a difference, right? Not everything has to be the same. You got someone's performing well, you want to provide them whatever resources are necessary to accelerate that, So
absolutely,
some really good examples. And one of the questions, is finding those high performers, right? This is something near and dear to my heart. How do you evaluate, new talent? That's obviously what we love to do.
The best way to get good talent is to have a really great culture and a really great company, because people want to come work there. But I think when you're building, you need to understand what those characteristics are that are going to be successful within this marketplace, and develop those requirements. 3 years ago, you could still kind of get away in medical device of bringing product in, using trunk stock, those type of things. Those days are gone. Now it's about VAC committees, directors, vice presidents, a process through every single facility. And so you want folks that can do both. You want folks that can do the lab work, right? And get doctors excited with clinical data. But then that person has to go and sit down with all the different departments within the facility. And so I teach to that, I coach to that, I hire to those characteristics because that's required in my space right now. I'm also big into like multiple interviews. I want to meet this person. It's right now at Zoom a couple times, and then it's absolutely face to face. I want to have lunch with them, maybe dinner, and just see what they're like from a personal aspect, because culture is really, really important to me, and how you treat your customers, how you treat your managers, me, anybody that you work with, like that can make or break a company.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of that virtuous loop you discussed, right? You get the right culture, the right attitude, and it creates a good company. A good company people want to work for, and it creates that virtuous loop overall, while still understanding some of the core responsibilities and skills need to be successful, right? I mean, your example was
absolutely
someone that's clinical, but also has great business mindset to be able to talk to the C-suite as well as the clinician, right? But depending on what that role is, understanding those technical capabilities, but then spend enough time to tease out the attitude, capabilities of it as well, right? I think, and we've done several surveys, and it's funny. What do you think's been the most successful? Your most successful hires, what was more important? Was it the attitude? Was it their education? Was it their previous experience? It's like 70 to 30 attitude, every time. So it matters. So we, on this call, we don't always get just people that are leaders. We get a lot of people that want to be leaders, want to be where you are, in a few years. So for those individuals, what would you say to them as aspiring leaders? What do they need to do to be tapped? What would you recommend?
I'm going to break this out again for you. I think to become a frontline manager, there's many opportunities, whether it's a field sales trainer or helping marketing or taking on additional responsibilities. You have to be able to take those responsibilities on. And the answer is yes. Yes, I'll do this. Yep, I'll do this. Like, you want to be that go-to person within your organization, right? And you're not going to be compensated for it. Don't ask for it. Being willing to relocate. There's many a times I've relocated 3 times for jobs, and every time I got a promotion. And so if you want to take on a maybe beat up territory or beat up region, be willing to do that, can go a long ways. study, then going on to, a VP and above is, I think it's really like studying the organization, studying the CEO, what's important to them, what do they do well, what don't they do well, what are their hot buttons, and what do they don't want to talk about. And if you can really have more interactions with those people that are making those decisions, and all those interactions are positive, and you're asking good questions, and you're talking about things that are important to them. I mean, listen, you're selling, right? I mean, the next time there's an opportunity that comes up, Joe's my guy. I'm thinking about Joe. Oh yeah, Joe interviewed for this before. Joe did this. And that's what you want to happen. And it's not about, hey, just always going out to drinks with everybody. It's about having quality interactions with that person that shows that you understand the business and the direction the business is going, not just that, the Bears lost for the fourth time in a row. Like, that's not what they want to talk about. And so those are the things to think about when interacting with those executives. You've got to kind of study them so that way you can kind of move up into their same realm.
Yeah, no, I love that. Great suggestion. One, I've asked this question of leaders on this program many times, and almost invariably the first step is stick your hand up, right? And say volunteer and do something. Be don't just go do it. Take action, take initiative, right? Like, invariably that's the first step. But I love the second step that you suggested is understand the organization, its goals, its leadership, what's important to them. Be inquisitive about the core fundamentals of the business, not just what happened on Monday Night Football, right? Because sometimes you can say he likes you, and I know I've been in the evaluation process. We've talked about certain candidates, and we're like, great guy, be a great neighbor, love to talk football with him, right? But I don't think he's the right guy for the role, So, don't be a great neighbor, be a great, executive, right? Right. I mean, you can be a good neighbor as well, but be more than a good neighbor, maybe I should.
No, you're exactly right.
Yeah. I like that. Guys,
and that's how, I mean,
couple more questions here, but please comment below. I see we got a few comments. We're going to take all those questions, as many as we can. And Tony's going to ask it. So, so please comment below if you've got something you're thinking. Go ahead. I cut you off there right when I start talking.
No, I was just going to say, like, that's how I got my first vice president job. I really understood our CEO. And so when the time came to be promoted, I was the person they promoted. It's because I was really in tune with the organization. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, really good. I mean, I think it's important to know. Last question. This one's fun. But get a little chance. Favorite superhero and why?
Favorite superhero. Listen, I grew up in the Super Friends era, and so, my sister and I would wake up at like 6:50 on Saturday mornings and have our bowl of Cheerios or Cocoa Puffs or whatever, as the screen was like different colors, waiting for Super Friends to start.
Yeah.
And when it started, it was go time for that week, right? And so, Superman's still
and fighting over who's getting the last bowl of Cocoa Puffs, right? Or the or the Fruity Pebbles, one of those.
It was also, not to date myself, it was also fighting over who had to like turn the volume up or down because there's no remotes back then, right? Okay. And so, but Superman's still the guy, right? Like, leader of the Hall of Justice, and when Aquaman or Wonder Twins like needed help, like he would go get them. And so, I think Superman's still my guy.
Yeah. Hey, he is the apex. I like Superman, and whenever you want to feel good, this is actually, I think I read a psychology. If you stand like Superman, your confidence level will psychologically go up. So, so you can stand like Superman and actually be Superman,
There you go.
Okay. Hey, we're going to take a few of these questions, guys. We're going to take some questions. Comment below. That's where I'm going to be pulling them from. Let's see. We've got one here from Sarah. What strategies do you use to motivate, inspire your team during challenging times? It's a great one. Thanks, Sarah.
I think it's easy for organizations to try to like keep keep the commercial team a little bit in the dark during tough times. Maybe it's a back order, maybe it's the severity of a back order, maybe it's this product, maybe that product. And I get it. You can't, you try to be as transparent as possible, and you can't tell every single detail, right? I get that. But I think the more they know, the more they're prepared, and the better the job they can do in communicating with their customers.
Yeah.
I think it's also you building trust with the sales organization that we had this issue. We know what the issue is. We're solving the issue. This problem's not happening again. We're going back through all the different processes of manufacturing to make sure we're covered in all of our different product categories. And then, if it prolongs and it prolongs and prolongs, maybe there is some things with quotas and compensation that you may consider. But I think for the most part, when you get through a challenging time or there's some type of issue here or there, sitting down, discussing it, being as transparent as possible, and then giving them confidence that we've solved this problem, it's not going to happen again, really gets you through that tough time.
Yeah. No, I always say in darkness, people think are monsters, right? So if you can turn on the light, and be as transparent. I mean, these are, adults, intelligent adults, and they get in the boat along with you, they're usually more likely to keep rowing, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, I like
absolutely.
that. So we got another one here from Shelby. So someone to break in. Looks like kinesiology degree. He's trying to break into med device. Question for Shelby. What would you recommend?
We still look for folks that have sales experience. And so I assume you're talking about a sales position. If you're talking about marketing position, I think it's the same type of thing, some type of marketing experience that you've done this before. For sales, it's really a stack rankings. And so, there's many companies that still go back to, ADP and, those type of paychecks companies. And, I can't even think of, but the rental car companies and some things like that show the stack rankings. And I think what's interesting now that I guess I'm a little bit older and more experienced, but it's not forever. It's a couple years. And if you go and just really work hard and get your stack rankings and they're positive, you're going to get opportunities within med device. And this is what I did. Like I got my first med device job. It wasn't the best. We didn't have a great experience for a year and a half. And then I moved to the next one. But every single position got me to another goal that I wanted. Whether it was got back me into hospital sales, got me into medical device, got me into a higher level medical device, got me into a startup. Like depending on which way you want to go, make sure those decisions you make are moving you in a direction that you want to take your career. Don't just move just because you're making a couple more bucks. $50,000 increase when you take taxes out isn't getting you that much. Go to what's going to get you where you want to go in your career and the type of physicians you may want to sell to, the type of departments you want to sell to. But it's only a couple years to get that quote unquote sales experience of stack rankings. And then really the sky's the limit.
I couldn't agree more, Tony. That's exactly what I tell people who talk to us all the time. And a lot of them are concerned about like, well, what if I jump after that 2-year point? Am I going to look like a job hopper or dove stick? I think if really there is logical progression beyond money of why you made a change, it never really works against the candidate, especially in that time of their career. It really does.
Yep. I agree.
I think great suggestions. Here's another one. I don't know who the user is here, but what kind of strategy do you employ to build and maintain trust, credibility with your team?
I'm a very much of a face-to-face, telephone, Zoom, dinners, lunches, ride days, national sales meeting communicator. And I feel like that's helped me over the years when delivering great news, okay news, or bad news. Mm-hmm. And it allows them or people to trust that what comes out of my mouth is the truth and it comes from the right place. And that's all I can do, but I don't deliver news via text or via email or those type of things. I want them to hear my voice or see my face when I deliver good or bad news. And I've done that throughout my career, and it just really gets rid of any distractions. or questions about the message, and you really build a lot of trust and followership from doing that.
Yeah. Well, when you think of 70% of your communication is nonverbal,
Right.
inflection, facial, all those things that hit that subconscious, it takes a lot of, really, really eloquent writing, which I know I do not have that to overcome 70% of the impact. Right. So, let's see, we've got a couple other.
My only free advice about that one is if you're going to deliver good news or bad news, make sure you're prepared as well as a leader. I've had to deliver some bad news and I was like a ghost, I guess, what I was told after the fact. And just make sure you get your put together as well if you're going to deliver bad news.
Got it. Yeah, good suggestion. Last question here for, and we'll take this last one and wrap up. How do you adapt your leadership style to suit different team members or situations? It kind of dovetails perfectly what you were just talking about, delivering bad news, right? So, but
yeah, I want to understand every member of my team, right? And so whether it's my manager team, I want to know what's important to them. When I was a frontline manager, I want to know what's important to every single one of my sales reps. And I'll give you a couple examples. There was one, I had a more mature sales rep. She didn't care about being promoted. She didn't care about taking on more responsibility. She just wanted to go out there and do her job. And I would ride with her and I was like, wow, this is not how I would do it, but she's very successful in doing that. And so what I did, I supported her, right? I supported her in her endeavors and how she did things because it was different, but it was very successful. And it taught me a lot as a leader. I also had another rep that, money was important, but recognition wasn't. She was a single mother and she wanted more time off with her daughter. And so we put a plan together that she could have an extra vacation day once a quarter if she hit her certain numbers and things like that. I think I go back to know your people, know what drives them, know what's important to them. If you're talking to a sales rep that's been there for 20 years or a rep that's been there for one or a clinical representative, you're going to talk to them about certain things a different way. And that's your job as a leader.
Awesome. No, great. I think excellent exclamation point on this for sure, because ultimately leadership is about understanding the people, helping them achieve where they want to be. And to do that, you got to understand their goals and their needs and not assume and project what was important to you, and as you mentioned, there's seasons, that whether you're at a point in your career or your early stage of parenthood or you just graduated college, right? It's going to change. So, staying close to all that. So really great insight and examples. I can't thank you enough, Tony, for coming on, sharing your great leadership experience and your knowledge you've gained with us and the entire FloodGate family. Thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. This has been fantastic, Joe. Thank you very much for putting this together.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. And if there's more questions later, please put them below. We will monitor this and answer it to our best of our ability and respond to you. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you again, Tony.
Thank you.